Okay, so we are going to move on to 3.6 now. So 3.6 is on evaluating functions. So f of x is read like that, f of x. The parentheses mean of. It's different than the of multiplication. We're not actually multiplying. It's just what you're finding the value for what x, of what x. So the letter to the left of the parentheses is the name of the function. And the part in the parentheses is the input for the function. And so because we normally have the x as our input, there's normally an x inside of the parentheses, like you see here, f of x.
I can't see anything.
Oh, you can't. Okay. Thank you for letting me know. I may have accidentally hit the stop share in that process. So the for f of x, this x is indicating the input for your function.
Okay.
It does not mean you are multiplying. It does not mean multiplication. So for example, f of 3 does not mean you're multiplying f of x and 3. It means you're finding the value of your function when x is 3. So that's the main area where students make mistakes. They think that it means multiplication, but when you have a function, a letter outside, it actually means you're evaluating at that number. So x represents the input. And then the f of x represents the output. So f of x is the same thing as once you put in your input, the value you get out is your output, your y. So again, f of x is the same thing as saying y. I won't worry about the other two blanks because it's not that important to this class. So let's take a look at this example down here. What is g of 1? So when I have an x of 1, what is my y?
3.
3. So it means y is 3 when x is 1. What if I have a 4 here? What's a g of 4?
Cutting 6.
So there's your x. What you get out from that is your y. And then lastly, -3 for your x gives you a g of -3 of
-1.
Exactly. So you could also, besides putting in numbers and looking at it as an ordered pair, have it as an equation. So h of this black square there, that's your input. It's a placeholder for your x. So see how there's the x here and the x here? Whatever's here goes there. So in this case, it's going to be 2 times this black square plus 5. For this one, 2 times the 3 plus 5, which you can then simplify further. Or 2 times, this is where the x was, so it's replacing the x. And you distribute. And so the function basically is saying 2 times whatever's in the parentheses plus 5. That's what that's saying. So So I've got a bunch of practice problems. I'm not going to go through them all, but maybe we'll do a couple of them just to make sure we understand the different functions. So the most basic ones are where you're given a number and you can see that the x is now 3. So the x is now going to be 3. Sometimes you have letters or variables or even that black box symbol of some sort in there. G of m would be, you're now, instead of having an x in here, you have an m. So instead of having an x here, you're going to have a m. Again, you're just always doing 2 times what was in the parentheses. So when you get down here, it's, again, 2 times what was in the parentheses. And 2 times what was in the parentheses. All right, that is 2m, just so it's a little bit nicer open. And then here, we would find the value of this, and we'd add it to the value of this. So g of -4, I skipped that one, but I could quickly go back and just find that it's -8. And so now you can see g of 3 from part B was 6. And I'm going to add that to g of -4, which was -8 from part C. So my final answer would be -2. So you can add when they have different values, but if they have the same value you're evaluating at, you can simplify it. And so that is what we see if it would be a question like this, where it's f and g, f plus g, but both of 2. And so because they're both of 2, we can write it originally in the simplified format. But in order to evaluate, you need to split it up. Same with this. You need to split it, but they're both going to be evaluated at x. This open dot is for a composite, so another way of writing it like this. And so we're going to talk more about that. So let me go back to the other page. We'll do some of those. So here are the composite ones written in the in this format. Again, this could be written as f of g of 5. It just would have an open dot to show that it's a composite. So we need to, just like with PEMDAS, start on the inside in the parentheses and figure out what g of 5 is. So g of 5 is going to the g function and plugging in 5. So it's going to be 2 times 5 plus 1. 10 plus 1, which is 11. So g of 5 is 11. So now I can say that f of g of 5 is equal to f of 11 because g of 5 is 11. So now I need to figure out what g of 11 is. Sorry, f of 11 is. It's always a 2-step process. Find the value of the inner one and then find the value for the function at that point. So f of 11 will be 11 squared plus 3. 121 plus 3, so 124. So this was an intermediary step. It's not your final answer. It was just finding this value. So my final answer to this problem is the 124. Let me do D, because it's got not only a quantity, it also has a variable in it, and it'll also involve us needing to FOIL. So we need to figure out what f of m plus 7 is and do g of that. So this part is f. F says to square it, square what's in the parentheses. X means what's in the parentheses, square it and add 3. So when you're squaring, that means you're multiplying it by itself. Make sure that you don't just distribute a 2 because you cannot do that over addition. Exponents only work if it's a product, if they were multiplied together. So we'll FOIL m times m, then m times 7, then 7 times m, and then 7 times 7. And then we'll add the 3. And so that's the inner part. That's the f of m plus 7. So now we need to do g of that. So we're going to do g of and g says we're going to do 2 times what was in the parentheses plus 1. So we're going to do 2 times what's in the parentheses and then add 1. So then you multiply and combine your like terms. Oh, hi, Andrew.
Hi.
We're just doing a few questions on, or a little bit on a lesson for 3.6 and 3.7 still. And then if there's questions, I'm happy to answer those afterwards. For any stuff. And if you have any questions while we're doing this, feel free to interrupt.
Okay, yeah, I just had questions on 3.6.
Okay. So let me address one other thing on here, and then maybe we'll take care of that question since it's related to this section.
Okay.
One other situation that comes up sometimes that is hard for students is when it's written like this and you're trying to find the x. And so f of x equals 3. So you're going to substitute that in for your f of x. So now you have 3 equals 2x plus 5. So now you can solve for x. Subtract 5 and then divide by 2. And so this is basically saying your output is 3, your y is 3, like y equals mx plus b, your y is 3 at what x? So that is 3.6. And Andrew, you said you had a question.
Yeah, the 2 that I got stuck on were question number 8 and the word problem at the end. With
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get to that, to the homework screen.
Okay.
Okay, so you say question number 6?
8.
8, okay. So graph this function, then use the line tool, and then use the dot tool. So what a lot of my students had trouble with on this question was not using the dot tool, and so they missed that part.
Yeah, that's probably what I'm having, because what's the dot tool?
This one.
Oh. That makes sense.
So basically, if you want to plot this and you're not familiar with parabolas, you can plug in some x's, like if x is 0, and just make sure you realize it's a parabola, or if you don't realize it's a parabola and you start making yourself a t-table to graph it, you'll realize it doesn't make a line. So this is a parabola that if you plug in 0, 0 squared is 0 plus 1, so it's 1. And then when you plug in like 1, 1 squared is 1 plus 1 gives you 2. If you plugged in 2, 2 squared is 4 plus 1 gives you 5. So you can see that that is this function.
Oh, okay.
So if you're not familiar with the shapes, you can also type it into your graphing calculator and see the shape and then go, oh, I need to use this tool.
Okay.
Then use the line tool to draw the line x equals 1. So the line tool, and x equals 1 is that vertical line where the x's are always 1, and I can plot the second point anywhere. I can even put this first one anywhere I wanted. It just has to be the vertical line going through x is 1. And then
Okay.
it says plot the point 1 f of 1. So this means what is the y when the x is 1? So when we plugged in 1, we saw earlier, I said it earlier, 1 squared is 1 plus 1 is 2.
Mm,
So 1, 2, I can put my dot there.
that's where I'm getting messed up, is I forget to plot the dot. And
Okay.
it keeps marking it wrong, and I could not figure out why it was doing that. Okay.
All right, and then you had a question on the last one also.
The last one, kind of like I said when I was messaging you, I get confused on word problems